to the Growth Whisperers, where everything that we talk about is building enduring, great companies, companies that last, companies that are rewarding, companies that people, owners, employees love to work in and are very proud of. Today, as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence. Kevin, g'day, and how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brad. As always, there's always good things happening in the world, but it was a stunning, beautiful day here in the Okanagan region of Canada, and sunny, although incredibly cold. It was just great. It's a great Sunday here in Vancouver. Well, actually, in just outside of Kelowna, a place called Peachland.
Peachland. Oh,
How about you?
Sounds like a lovely spot. Yeah, I'm good. Very, very good. We're hopefully beginning to see the end of some border restrictions and some vaccine increasing over here. So little by little, as every week passes, there are things that are opening up, which is positive. Of course, comes with a lot of challenges, but positive in a sense, and something to look forward to. So, as always, we do like to start with a word or phrase of the day. Kevin, any word or phrase that you'd like to kick us off with today?
Yeah, today it is America. Because, I've got 4 trips to the U.S. planned in the remainder of this year, probably 2 by airplane and at least 2, maybe 3 driving, because the land border opens up and I'll be able to drive back. And I grew up 15 minutes from the U.S. border, and we would go across literally to buy gas and get like milk or something like that when we were kids. Or my mom would ask me to pick up the milk. I wasn't going to buy milk. But yeah, so it was almost like a right to us. And this is the longest period in my life I think I've not been driving across that border that I can see from my place in Vancouver. So I'm excited to get back into the great America. I love the US, and I'm really excited to get back there.
Awesome. I cannot imagine going to a different country to get milk. It's so foreign.
Well, it was so much cheaper. They have such a subsidized, I believe it, whether it was the scale, I think there's a lot of subsidies for dairy in the US. It was literally both gas and things like milk, cheese, eggs, and that would be half the price.
Wow.
Literally just incredible differences just across the border. We used to not even need a passport. We would just cross with our driver's licenses when I was a kid.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so how
awesome.
about you? What's your word of the day?
Simple. Sometimes we try to make things so complicated. We've done podcasts on this before, but yeah, it's just as I've reflected on what's been going on in my world, the work that I've been doing with people, being able to make something complex simple, or alternatively avoiding making something too complex for no real reason and keeping it simple. The power of simple is so important.
Well, it's so important, and it doesn't work otherwise. Interesting. I had an executive ask me some feedback on some presentations they're making. They're new and executive in a company, and that was the one thing I said. I said, at the end of the day, I don't know what you need to do it, but you need to boil things down and make them dramatically more simple.
Yeah.
Because your intent is good, but both your communication and the process you're using is incredibly complex and confusing. And I explained how sometimes I will spend, depending on what it is, first time I'm facilitating something, 1 or 2 hours figuring out how to make it really simple.
Yeah.
It goes back to my favorite quote from Mark Twain, which may or may not be from him, but I'm going to give him credit anyways, which is, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. It's hard to be succinct.
Yeah.
And mastery is simplicity. Mastery is making things look easy and be easy to understand. I love it. So
part of
American simple, or simply
of,
American. Simply American maybe can be the theme of the show.
Simply American. Simply American. That's very good. So what are we talking about today, Kevin?
We're talking about one of our favorite subjects. It's a cartoon book. Actually, we like cartoon books. Yes, we both have our copies.
Yes,
it's a
we
wonderful
do.
book on it's Michael Porter's strategy concepts put into a cartoon book. Thank you. Written by Joan Margarita. and illustrated by Emil Holmwood and conceived by Henrik Zimmerman. So it's simplifying Porter's strategy work. A strategy is simple. Speaking of simple, Brad, this book goes through all the simple concepts of strategy. And a lot of people know the word. Even more can probably spell it. But very few actually really get strategy and are good at it. A very small portion of the executives that we work with are good at strategy.
Yeah. For those of you on the who are only listening, who don't have the visuals, Kevin and I both held up a bright red book with cartoon characters on the front, and the title is "What is Strategy? An Illustrated Guide to Michael Porter." So there was originally a Harvard Business Review article that came out entitled "What is Strategy?" and we've read that. All of the people that I work with have read that. What Joan Magretta has done has been able to turn that article into effectively a comic book that is so simple and powerful.
Yeah. And so that's what we're going to dig into today. And in this, he has a section saying the 7 most common strategy mistakes. And I tell you, talking about strategy is hard because we have to really, pry people's brains away from what they think they know. And one of the things that we'll get into is even the distinction between marketing and strategy. We'll get into that in the show today. But why don't we just jump right in? Great book, highly, highly recommend it. Brad, you want to kind of walk us through number 1 and we'll kind of alternate back and forth?
Of course I do. So the first one is competing to be the best. So the teams that I work with have heard this at every single quarterly and annual workshop that we've done. So rather than competing to be the best, our job is to compete to be unique. So going down the same path as everyone else and thinking that somehow you can achieve better results. And what we're really trying to do, rather than competing to be the best, we want to compete to be the unique. And so that means that the reason that we write revenues is so that we can reinvest those revenues to become more unique relative to the competition.
Right. So I'll give an example. We were at Costco today. And, if you look, Costco's got deals on everything. And, of course, they encourage you to buy a lot. Well, generally, in your mind, what is a normal coffee mug worth, Brad? A coffee mug?
$10.
$10 for a normal one. And if you go to a dollar store, you can get them for $1 or for $2. So they're in many ways a commodity item. So there's a brand called Le Creuset, and I'm probably saying it wrong, but they make some of the best pots and pans and kitchen things. So when we were at Costco today, there was a box of 8 mugs. Now at Costco, if you were to buy 8 mugs or 8 glasses, you expect to spend about $20 because that's kind of a commodity price. Well, Le Creuset has their beautiful stuff and coffee mugs, and it was about $80 for 8 mugs. So it was about the price that you had guessed. Maybe you're used to buying more expensive mugs than I would buy. I don't know. But the point is that I know normally, probably $15 to $20 is what they would be in a box of 8. And Le Creuset mugs are probably some of the most expensive you can get. And they normally would probably be $25 a mug. And at Costco, you get 10 of them for $80. And they're beautiful. But why would you buy $80 mugs when you can buy $2 mugs? Well, because it's a brand that does something very different. It's a very, very high-end kitchenware brand, and they are beautifully finished. They're just stunning. And so that's the idea is it's not about competing to be the best, it's competing to be different. They also had 2 just basically bowls that they were selling at Costco, and they were $200 for 2 bowls. But that's because it's Le Creuset, and it's a premium brand that stands for the gourmet chef. Basically, it's considered to be chef quality, and that's the idea. What is that you're doing being different? Same with Tesla. Tesla just didn't come up with a car with a battery engine in it, although it did initially. It took a Lotus and put a battery in the first one, but the Model X and all of those other cars, they are very, very different than what's on the road. And they have been different for a long time. So it's about being different, not going to try and just be a better version of a basic coffee mug.
Yeah.
Being a more premium brand for a different reason.
To your point, I have this awesome image of all of the SUVs on the market. Let's say all of the main ones, and there's probably about 24 SUVs. You know, the Volvo, the Toyota, etc. And then they've got the Tesla Cybertruck, and because they're all great, they all have been kind of grayed out, so they all look the same. And then you've got this completely different looking thing. But you know what the problem here is, that as kids, we're taught to play sports and to compete in sports.
Correct.
And then as we grow up, maybe we compete in sports in adults, or we watch sports. And in sports, we think that everything that we need to do is to compete to be the best. We need to run further. We need to jump higher. We need to score more points. And people intuitively think that that translates into business. But in actual fact, that works against us in business if we compete to be the best, because by being better than the competition, there is a cost that's attributed to that. And that cost ultimately comes from the bottom line.
Yes, and it may not get you in some cases, it can get you a premium price. So it can, but it's a really slippery slope, because if you're being the best and the customer can't see a notable difference, they're not going to pay anymore, right? If you're taking just normal glasses and this normal glass, and you're going to make a better version, but it looks the same, feels the same, and everything else, you can't charge more. Again, you have to do something notably different. So it's great to be good at what you do, but you need to make sure that somehow it's unique in a way that the customer cares. Not just the best, because the best is only worth so much more. All right, so the next one, and this is a favorite of mine, it's substituting execution for strategy. And what will happen in a lot of businesses is that they will benchmark and they will do what I call best practices, which are generally mediocre practices because everyone does them. But they will go along and me to their business and refine execution, and they will get lower cost per unit, and they will get more efficiency, or they will get more yield, or they'll get better, faster, cheaper. They will really polish the whole machine and make it run incredibly well. Their execution will be so strong. And it's wonderful because the business does perform better. But if they're executing the same things that everyone else does, it kind of relates back to number one, is that they may enhance in just by focusing on execution, eroding their differentiation in the market. And one of the key things is listening to customer feedback. If you listen to your customer feedback a lot, you'll get some really good ideas to improve execution. But your customers don't tell you how to be different. Your customers generally tell you about the gaps in what you deliver, and they know those gaps because they've experienced different things with your competition. And they will often advise you on things to commoditize yourself, because you will become more like everybody else, which is very different than strategy, where you're thinking about being different. So yes, you can be more efficient, better results, and execution pays. It can be a short run or a short life, because you could be eroding your strategic advantage.
Oh, look, you need good execution. If you have poor execution, you simply won't make the profit. But strategy is a different lens. So imagine that you're wearing a pair of glasses that is the execution lens. We need to manufacture or execute or sell at the right efficiency. We need to sell at the right profit. We need to have minimal returns or problems. And all of that is through one lens. But then you take off that lens and then you put on a different set of glasses, which is the strategy lens. And then it's a completely different way to look at it, because the execution should be working and the execution should be operating efficiently. But over here, when we put on the strategy lens, the objective is to create a unique and valuable position in the market that is different from your competitors. And
so like another way of saying it is
execution
execution is doing what we already do better, and strategy is doing better things. Yeah. Right? It's doing better things in the eyes of the customer, or different things in the eyes of the customer. And in many cases, like I have a client recently where we're talking about this, and we're looking at where their industry is going. And we can see how it's going to get more and more commoditized. Well, they went, well, let's go over here. They're going to keep the existing business, but they're going to do something very different and actually compete with themselves to do something that's notably different and very different than what the customer's getting, and gives them a value chain advantage that they wouldn't have in their existing business, which will come up later when we talk about marketing. So execution is seductive. And why, Brad, why do you think people get lost in execution sometimes?
Because that's what they think they're supposed to be doing. Because they just think, I'm a manager, I've got to get these units out. And, you know, I suppose they never stop to get outside of their role and to ask that question, you know, what is beyond execution? They never have the ability to stop. And, you know, we do it through our quarterly and annual planning workshops where we're working on strategy. But every week, every month, every quarter, every year, they're thinking that their whole job is to produce at any level in the organization, where in actual fact, the production is one lens, you remove that, and then you go into a separate one, which is how are we going to build this strategy? So number 3, let's go through number 3.
Yes, I love this one.
Yeah. Confusing marketing with strategy, focusing on customers and their needs, but missing the need for a tailored value chain. So just like I spoke about with the lenses a few moments ago with execution and strategy, once you have a strategy and it informs you on how you will have a unique and different position in the marketplace that is different from your competitors, and you're executing that well, marketing is a different lens again altogether. That's like taking off the strategy glasses and putting on the marketing glasses. And you know who struggles the most with this, in my experience, is marketing companies, because they think that marketing is everything. They think that the brand is everything, and it's very important. But just like marketing isn't execution or sales, strategy isn't marketing.
Yes, and the thing is with marketing strategy and marketing firms and marketing people, they don't reach back in to have operational advantages. Marketing finds a way to better tell our story and match it with needs of customers. They're perfect for that. But your strategy comes first. What is it that we do that gives us a competitive advantage? And again, whether it relates to suppliers or gaps in the marketplace or other strategic levers, financial pieces, unless you understand all of those things and take those into account, you could potentially have a weak strategy. So I look at it as it's strategy first, and then marketers can help us figure out the more of the go-to-market. But we got to find the gaps, because strategy is often seeing unmet needs in a market, or underserviced needs in a market, or creative ways to service those needs. For example, if you go and take, I think it was Hilti. It was one of the tool companies, Hilti, and they went from a pricing model of selling tools, both like drills, and Hilti, which is basically puts something like a bolt into existing concrete.
Yep.
It has like a shotgun shell and pushes it into concrete, blasts it into concrete. Well, what they went from is pricing from selling the tools and the parts to a per hole or per use. Instead of you buy the unit for $500 and buy some supplies, it was $1 per, and they went on that kind of pricing.
Yeah.
Which dramatically changed it in the eyes of the customer. The customer no longer had the responsibility for the tools and the maintenance and all of this other stuff. It was the supplier's responsibility, and they could just have a per price, which they could easily account for in their estimating. Marketing's never going to figure that out.
No.
Marketing is never going to figure something which is completely changes a business model that never existed before.
Yeah. Marketing is never going to figure that out. That's exactly right. They provide a really important service, but marketing is not strategy. Marketing doesn't consider the tailored value chain. It doesn't consider all of the inputs and how we can alter the inputs to provide difference within the market. Do you want to tell us about
so marketing is critical, and I love marketing, and I come from marketing, and I love marketing people. So don't get that wrong. It's just strategy sits above it. It's the CEO and a couple executives thinking it through, and you might involve marketing or anything else, but it's not a marketing activity. Marketing is closer to the execution and coming up with a value prop based on who we are or based on what we understand. So separating strategy and marketing, they're very, and because what it is people have a marketing strategy. So they think that there's strategy in it, but we're talking business and business model strategy versus marketing strategy. Yeah. Awesome. The next one is chasing the wrong goals. And, we get lost in the latest and the greatest and making people happy, when in reality, the job of a business and the number one measure of a CEO is return on capital, right? And it's looking at what can you do with the capital you have to get the best return you can get. Those are not easy decisions. Those are very, very hard decisions. So it's about being crystal clear on the stuff that matters most. And this requires a lot of debate, and it requires analysis. And generally it goes back to what is going to give us a unique or sustainable competitive advantage. And of course, you're going to allocate money to execution and optimization. But we want to make sure that there's enough to enhancing our strategy versus just enhancing our execution.
Yeah. So for example, you might figure out a way to create a position in the market that is unique and different. It is a completely unique and different position, and it will begin to separate you from the pack that is the commoditization within your market. But you can't do that in 90 days. And then you might look at it and think, well, at best, we could probably do something in about 3 years. In about 3 years, we may not have fully executed it, but we would be having organic growth because of that position, and it'd be fantastic. And then someone in the leadership team might say, yeah, but we want to make more profit this quarter or next quarter or this year. Like, let's focus on the problems of here and now, rather than chasing this other kind of area. And that's what they're kind of suggesting, that financial analysts encourage zero-sum competition by pushing everyone to look like the current market favorite. So trying to, rather than chasing something that's kind of there, knowing that it's going to take a while to enact your strategy, and the right strategy isn't chasing the wrong goals.
Yeah, and it's easy to do. We easily get sucked into goals, forgetting that we're probably chasing our competitors or chasing the latest fad. All right, good one. Okay.
Overestimating strengths is our number 5. Oh, I do love this one. So one might be in a strategy offsite, and one might be talking about, so tell me, what are your core competencies? What are the things that have made your business successful so far? And an answer could be, oh, well, it's our CRM, it's our hard work, it's the time that we've been in business, it's our name in the market. And these might be very good, but they might not be strengths enough that you could build a strategy on. A real strength has to be something the company can do better than any of its rivals, and better because you've chosen a different configuration or activities or technologies.
Yes, it's not that you just have bigger muscles, it's you know how to use them better, or you use them better.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a big part of what it is. And if you go again, this is all about strategy. People think that strengths alone can push them into a market. And, it's interesting. I have a client that I worked with in the US, and their strengths were like, they had an incredibly strong sales team.
Yeah.
Like they just muscled it, and they had they did have the best service probably in their industry. And they probably did have the best salespeople in their industry. But we had a meeting, and we went and did a value map where we mapped out their value creation versus their competitors from Blue Ocean Strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through it, and we finished it. The CEO and I looked at each other, and our eyes went wide open because they had no differentiation left.
No.
Differentiation was all gone. We were winning only because of our strengths in service and sales. And those aren't bad strengths to have, but we quickly had to work on some differentiation, because at some point, even if you can continue to win, it's a dangerous way to do it. Yeah. Because it's not, it's only sustainable if that team keeps up top performance, and it's too much based on muscle. It's not bad. And so while we continued with that, then we tried to come up with some different differentiation to have some different things in the market that would be more appealing to customers and make it easier for the salespeople to sell, not just muscle it.
Yeah, because what happens if your sales manager resigns and starts a business
Correct.
in competition? Or what happens if someone uses a new technology to compete against you? So there are many, many ways.
Yep.
But yeah, so really what we're saying there is it's something that it's the way that the strengths come together. Is it a real strength, or is it just, your confidence, or because you're proud of the company? Is it a real strength that can give us an advantage? Kev, do you want to take us through number 6?
Yep, absolutely. And this one is interesting because it's getting the definition of the business wrong. And generally, people sometimes define themselves as being in a business this wide, and they think of their core customers as being, everybody, whatever it happens to be, versus zooming in on what the business they are really, really in, and understanding the dynamics of it. Because sometimes what you think you're doing, you're not doing. And Porter has this awesome tool called the 5 forces that has you break down and look at the different industry forces, or the forces acting on your business, and has you really understand where you're at. So it's missing the business that you're really in because you've thought about it generically versus zooming in, and that 5 forces tool is a great way to do it.
Yeah. So for example, you might be working with an electrical company, and you might say, so what industry are you in? We're in the electrical industry. Okay, so which segment? Because the electrical encompasses everything from power line distribution through to installing solar panels in your roof, through to working on a nuclear power plant. And then installing a light in your house, everything within there. So if you get that definition wrong, and you are in the business of putting in lights in people's houses or distribution, and then you can go into what area you are in there, because suddenly all of those strengths and activities that you undertake can change remarkably depending on how you define that business. And a part of that is, who's your core customer? Who's the customer that you serve that will pay more profit? So let's move on to number 7, getting the geographic scope wrong. Usually defining industries as global when they're national or regional. Using the value chain to define business scope. Wherever you require a largely separate value chain to compete, you have crossed a defining boundary. So so our ambition may tell us that we're in an international market. Our ambition may tell us that, we'll just switch over to the US, or we'll just switch over to, the Chinese market, when in actual fact, it's a completely different market with different customers a different value chain, different suppliers, everything is different in there. So knowing, I mean, we used to say the sandbox. What is the sandbox? Where is the edge of the sandbox?
That's exactly
in which you're going to play.
Yeah, and where people get in trouble is when they expand into another market and think of it as an extension of what they're doing versus actually starting a new business. So I have one of my great clients that bought a business in a country in Europe. They're US based. And there was great aspiration around it, but the reality is running a business in another country, it extended so far out of their geographic scope. And they thought that they would be able to do it, and it was impossible for a lot of reasons. And that's a more obvious one. But even people going from Canada into the US, like we can see the US from a lot of places in Canada. But the reality is it's often completely different value chain, different partners, like different customers. Like a lot of the customers are not the same on each side of the border, and different ways of doing business. And when people expand and they don't give it the respect it deserves, they don't treat it as it's outside their geographic scope, they get destroyed because there's so many new variables. And for example, I've got one client that is going to be setting up in the US. They've thought about it very thoroughly, but they are setting it up like a brand new independent business in a brand new independent legal structure. It has to have a separate executive team, all of these things. And it's still going to be really hard, but they're setting it up as its own little hub in its own little space because they know it's way outside their geographic scope, although they could probably throw a rock at it and hit it from where they are in Canada.
Yeah. I've been watching this show on Netflix called High Score, and it's about the video game industry and how it evolved from, I guess, Pong to where it is today.
Yep.
And there's this one particular point in time when Nintendo had introduced new 16-bit technology compared to all of the previous 8-bit technology. And it was
16-bit.
16-bit, yeah, it was huge. But it was unheard of in the time. Everything was just blocks that were moving around, like Minecraft that we see before that. And so they had a gaming console that they launched in Japan, but it was as ugly as a dog's breakfast. Like it was just terrible to look at as a physical component to sell, but very successful in Japan because they had a different market. And so they had the advertising marketing manager from the US in Japan doing everything that she could to have it rebranded for the American market. And apparently several people quit their jobs because she was so dogged that your product that's successful here won't success because it's the ugliest red you've ever seen. It's got all of these instructions on the box like it's a different market. Yep. And so they believed that the things that worked in Japan would work in America, but it didn't.
Oh my gosh.
The outcome of that was the NES, or the Nintendo Entertainment System, which went on to get 97% of the gaming market for home gaming. But if they would have gone with the original, there's a very good chance that it wouldn't have.
Well, so funny one on that one, Brad, is back in the 70s, Chevrolet, the car maker, had a car called the Nova.
Yeah.
And then as they went to, share the American dream around the world, they took it to, I believe it was Spain. And then they wondered why the Nova wasn't selling. Well, Nova in Spanish, I think, means no go. Almost like it didn't run. Now, I may have botched that story, but I remember that from years ago. It's just, you got to understand and respect a different market, but that's about market differences. What we're talking about is the bounds of where your competitive advantage stops.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're talking about. Your geographic scope is where your competitive advantage is not longer valid, or you have to rebuild it differently. And that's where it gets dangerous. So getting the geographic scope wrong and forgetting that you're not going to be just there just like you are here. I know another client that did a massive expansion, and it was way outside their geographic scope, and They didn't have the right people, and it's just so painful. But anyway, that's a long story.
I guess to close that one out, I love the last sentence there. Wherever you require a largely separate value chain to compete, you have crossed a defining boundary.
Yes.
So it's the value chain that is the trigger for getting the geographic scope right.
Yep, absolutely. And I got another client that's based in your great country, and they export all around the world. So the value chain is all in Australia. So them moving into a new country is hard, but it's not as big a deal because they just need to have a local partner and someone who distributes their product. And they're just, shipping versus operating in these other countries. Awesome. All right. So great list. So just to kind of do a quick review of this. And again, we highly, highly recommend this book. What is Strategy? Illustrated Guide to Michael Porter. Great thinking. He is one of the greatest thinkers on strategy. But the things are competing to be the best versus competing to be unique. Substituting execution for strategy, thinking you can do it better, faster, cheaper to get your way to a competitive advantage in the long term. Confusing marketing with strategy. Brad, do you want to pick up the last 4 there?
Chasing the wrong goals. Your job is not to make current shareholders happy. Your job is to build a unique and valuable position in the market that is different from competitors. Number 5 is overestimating your strengths. Your CRM or your sales team might not really be a strength. You need to filter what you deem to be your strengths through the pride that you have in the organization. Every company looks at their peers and says, they're not that great. They're terrible. And they're saying the same about you. Number 6 is getting the definition of the business wrong. Understanding the industry that we're in. We're not in the broad definition of the industry. We're in the narrow definition in which we play. And then finally, number 7 is getting the geographic scope wrong, as we just said, making sure that our strategy depends on our value chain. Well, what a good chat we've had today, Kevin.
I love this around strategic thinking, and strategy is so powerful, and it's work to get teams to get there often, unless they're in a crunch. All right. Well, thanks for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast. I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm here with Brad Giles, as we always are. For the video version, go to youtube.com and search for The Growth Whisperers. Brad can be reached at evolutionpartners.com.au, and I and my firm can be reached at lawrenceandco.com. Hope you have an awesome week, and we will see you next week.